There is a reason why Greek mythology is used for kids to understand morality. And the reason is the following. It is very clean-cut what we consider moral or immoral in Greek mythology. That is to say that every decision that a character takes is being justified and explained why, even if in some occasions justified, it is immoral if you do it for your own personal interest. It is very explicit to explain and understand for characters what is the fine line between morality and doing the right thing, but actually prioritizing your own interest and doing the not the right thing, taking the wrong path, taking the path that leads you to hubris, that leads you to personal benefit, that leads you to arrogance. And this is why we think opening government will win this debate. But because we're going to have the most clean characterization, which is the most relevant analysis in this round, and I have because I'm fucking Greek, and probably the only Greek person in the panel, in order to actually explain how morality works in Greek mythology and why Clytemnestra and other people perceive this type of morality and why this is justified. Okay. Then I'm going to do you a benefit and say, the best opposition line is that your son kills you because you killed his father, and this is a trade-off. Therefore, we're okay to accept that at some moment your son will kill you, and this is perfectly fine and justified, but you still should kill your husband, and why you have the moral high ground to do so. Okay, let's see now how morality is perceived in Greece and why this preempts a lot of the stuff about retaliation that Clytemnestra might have. One, you know that when you involve someone innocent in a trade, this is considered a priori immoral, because this person is not directly involved in this, right? So it's not... No. Maybe, yes, what?
Yeah, did they sacrifice other people in ancient Greece as well? And did people consider that moral or immoral?
Immoral, and I will explain. No, like justified, but then you know that consequences are coming, which is hubris and nemesis. I will explain. Okay, one. So when you include an innocent person in the trading, let's say Achilles steals Helen, then he's morally responsible. Even if he's doing this for the right reasons because Helen actually likes him over someone else, this is still hubris because you steal another person's women. This is all considered, even if for the good reasons, good intentions, i.e. winning the war in this analogy, still considered immoral because you know that you shouldn't do this in the first place. So in this occasion, and seeing the analogy, you get a 10-year-old and you throw them off the cliff in order to have prosperity on winds. Funny joke, prosperity on winds is not even the tipping point of winning the war, it's just you arriving there faster and being more convenient. So it's not actually necessary to make this trade, right? It is not necessary that you make this type of sacrifice. But then secondly, to the degree that you choose this as not a mandatory choice, but an optional choice. Because the prophecy was not like it's you or her. The prophecy is like you go faster or you kill your own daughter. Or maybe you are more likely to win the war or you kill your own daughter. This means that the prophecy is not binding. It's not consequential. It does not say that the prophecy, if you don't kill your daughter, then something entirely bad happens. This means that you don't have the necessity to do this on a moral basis. You're not obliged, you're just choosing. Why all of this analysis is important? Because it gives the moral high ground of explaining why this has been condemned and characterized as hubris. And hubris in Greek means when you do something and you expect a bad outcome to come and bite you in the ass because you did this bad thing. Even if justified, as again said, you still get the outcome, which is the negative outcome because you made this type of immoral choice, right?
Yeah.
No. Then why then Clytemnestra is involved in this and how she sees this? Okay. One, she thinks this is divine approval. Okay, I will do the practical things afterwards, but I think this is more relevant and more nuanced to a degree. Like, she feels that gods have given her the opportunity, planning and waiting for 10 years, rationalizing it to her own mind, why Zeus and, Hera wants her to take revenge, wants to actually, do justice by the monument of her daughter that she went unrightfully under the cliff. So she thinks she's the divine hand, right? She thinks she's doing the merciful thing. She's taking out the village from the blasphemy and the nemesis that will wrath upon them, exactly because he chose blasphemy, he chose arrogance, he condemned the village into fucked over weather conditions and stuff like that, exactly because he were too arrogant and he want to make sure that he's gonna be there on time for the war, and he didn't try to do it in another way. He was not obliged to kill Iphigenia, but he actually did. Therefore Clytemnestra rationalizes that this is the only way to save her family but also the village, right? But then secondly, look, and this is also spec, but but intuitively you can get it. No. Agamemnon comes with another woman, right? She comes with Cassandra. And this is so bad look. When you're a woman and you see someone living for 10 years, and then you have another woman that's coming and okay, she's gonna take your place and you're gonna be fucked over from the village and all of this stuff. You're kind of a first maneuver thing. You have to do something in order to be able to sustain yourself. You have to do something to keep your position in power. Because 10 years he was absent and she ruled the fucking thing, right? She was the goddess of this village. She had all the grapes and the people. she had all the convenience, and now you see someone who has abandoned you, killed your own spore, and then comes back with another woman as a trophy that will just replace you. This gives a preserved incentive, not only for morality, but for practical benefits on your own, for your own survival to actually act on it. Are you gonna wait around? If our opening opposition clause says this is spec, imagine Greek dudes back in the day being absent for 10 years. Do you think they didn't fuck around for 10 years and waited to their beloved wife? Like, fuck no. So I think this is also intuitive. Why the posthumous fame then is more important? Because what posthumous fame means that you're doing the right thing for your village and your family, so you go to heaven exactly because of that. You go to the Olympus. So Clytemnestra thinks that the only way to salvage her soul is to actually condemn the Agamemnon. Because if you condemn Agamemnon, you are the only one who can do this. Because notice, there is no other accountability mechanism. There is no other way for Nemesis to come. Because nobody will kill Agamemnon because he's too powerful, right? The only blind spot is his wife. So you see and you rationalize that you are the only person who can bring Nemesis. There is no court, there is no one as an opposition party that can come and kill him. Therefore, you rationalize that you are the only one who can bring Nemesis. If not, then the village and your family dies and all of this stuff. Okay, why the well-being then is better off in outside the house? Op has to prove why you won't be replaced, why you won't be thrown out, why you think that your daughter didn't deserve to live, and why you think you won't be complicit if you allow him to do this, right? Because on the comparative, when you don't kill him, you become complicit. You think this was justified. You become yourself arrogant. Therefore, you're afraid also Nemesis coming upon you, right? Because the moment that you're complicit, you're allowing this type of Nemesis to happen. You're allowing this type of choice to happen from Agamemnon. So in the rest of the house, you're probably immoral and probably not going to the Olympus, but in outside the house, you're probably maintaining more safety because you're actually doing the first maneuver of not dying by Cassandra, of not being replaced by Cassandra. But then secondly, you're doing the most virtuous thing. You're doing the thing that is necessary for them to actually survive the next heat and to survive Nemesis that will be wrath upon you. All in all, this is important, and I think this is the most important thing. You have to understand that Greeks were not giving a second chance to people that would do an immoral thing. And if you buy that including an innocent child is immoral for what any cause, non-consequential cause, this is what Nemesis means. This is why Clytemnestra has to act. For all of the above reasons, vote OG.
I thank the speaker for that speech. Leader of opposition to start on the opposition bench.
Klaudia, will you allow me to steal your point? Okay, fine, no.
Okay, panel ready?
Yes, oh, there you are.
Thank you. Okay, now I can start. We've all been in the situation where we have a motion that we have spec on because we're from some place, and then we're like, no, trust me, bro, I'm from this place. I've done this a billion times. I don't blame George for trying, but it's Greek bullshit, and just because it's in the alphabet does not make it any less bullshit. Now, note, first and most intuitive reason. Even if he's right about all of his analysis, this is about books that we read today and interpret in a modern light. Clytemnestra was not reading these books. She was not living these books. In her life, things are not so black and white and clear cut, meaning that she has no insight into that this is what the world ought to look like. This is the real world for her, right? Secondly, immoral to sacrifice innocence is a blatant fucking lie. They sacrifice innocence all the fucking time, and usually because it's the will of the god. Odysseus throws an infant off a cliff to make sure that the war does not continue. This is seen as a highly moral act, protecting his own people from the futures of the war, right? This is something that is normalized because the gods demand sacrifices at specific points in time to show your devotion and to show, to grant you favor, right? Secondly, they say, moral high ground of hubris. But this is also intuitively interpreted as Clytemnestra hubris. Note why Agamemnon has to sacrifice his child. The god Io demands a sacrifice for favorable winds to return home. And the difference here is not, they get a speed boost home. No, the difference is they may never return. Look at what happens to Odysseus, right? Look at 20 years at sea and never coming back. He's the only one that makes it alive, and that's only because he makes another deal with Apollo later on. So, intuitively, it was very likely that none of Agamemnon's crew or Agamemnon would ever return. So he was placed in an impossible situation, and he prioritized prioritize the lives of his crew and the future of his country. You cannot blame him for this, otherwise you succumb to your own hubris and open yourself up for divine punishment. So if George wants to say you go to Olympus, no bro, your soul will get tormented for hell, because I will not forgive this transgression. He will not forgive you for killing somebody, for following the will that he imposed upon him, right? Cool. That out of the way, 3 intuitive things coming from opening opposition that clearly win this debate. Why, as Clytemnestra in an act emotion, this is bad for your future, something you likely care about. Why this is bad for your children, something that you as a mother intuitively care about very highly. And thirdly, what this is internal torture emotionally, even if none of these things manifest themselves. One, why is this bad for your future? Intuitively, you care about your own well-being and your own future. You have the perception of your future self, and you care what this future self is going to look like, right? Know that you probably want to continue being queen. Now note, if you murder Agamemnon, and OG never talk about how you do this, right? So I tell you, you will do this relatively publicly, because any way that you can do this, people are going to know that you did it. Why? Because firstly, you have the most means, you have to use access to him at all times. The way that you probably do this is something like poison. People know that you're the most likely to be able to poison him because the food you give him is not tested, whereas everybody else's food is. Secondly, you're basically the only one that has motive. He just came back from a victorious campaign. Everybody loves him because the war is finally over, and he comes back with spoils and shit, right? The Trojans couldn't, because they don't have the capacity or don't want to reignite the war. Nobody within the kingdom wants to do this, and you're the prime suspect. Even if you're not guilty, this is horrible and you will get accused, right? That out of the way means that you will probably not be queen if you kill him. Why? Because he has brothers, he has advisors that will take vengeance. They say, okay, your son will kill you. Bro, no, this is horrible for you because you do not wish to die a horrible death for vengeance that might not even be justified, right? Secondly, who? Yes, go.
Yes, in ancient Greek society, what is the worth of a woman relative to the man in her household?
Repeat.
In ancient Greek society, what is the value of the woman relative to a man and her household?
Relatively high when he is in war, right? But still, you're unlikely to continue to be queen if you kill Agamemnon, right? Because you are the people who have to avenge him are, one, duty bound to avenge their king. Secondly, they are divinity bound to take vengeance against senseless murder. Thirdly, he just came back from the war. There is a bunch of armed generals who still have their armies under their command, who can and want to take revenge. Furthermore, these are the same generals who believe that their lives were saved because of this sacrifice, and now you kill a man because he saved their lives. This is unjust, and you must do this because they love Agamemnon for both winning the war and saving their lives, right? Further on, it is likely that you will cause chaos. At the point where you create this possibility, you create a place where succession is an unknown possibility. Meaning at the point where you do regicide, you are likely to take your own children in a position where it is precarious whether they are still in the line of succession, because the only way for them to do this will be because regicide happened. Meaning that there will be vying for power between his generals who think they can usurp the throne now that it is weakened and Agamemnon no longer controls armies. But furthermore, your kid might get accused of being in this plot with you because they stand to directly benefit from this action, and therefore their position, their claim to the throne is going to be more tenuous, meaning your children might get accused of this, right? Other rivals have the incentive to try to make deals with people who are against Agamemnon to try to usurp the power, meaning not only do you lower your possibility to be queen, you're more likely to make life horrible for your children. Now, no. If you buy OG's characterization, that Clytemnestra cares so deeply about her daughter that she is willing to potentially risk her soul going to hell, risk potentially dying at the hands of her son, she probably also cares about her 3 remaining children to an equal extent. And given that I can't quantify how much you care for a single child, I can qualify how many children you have remaining. Your primary priority is probably to the living children, because you have some faith that the gods will take care of the posthumous justice and deliver divine justice. Divine justice and divine retribution is what is demanded of Agamemnon. So therefore, you care about those 3 children living good lives. What do you do for your children? They have no father. They might die in power vacuums, right? They're guaranteed nearly to lose the wealth that Agamemnon had and lose their positions, right? They're guaranteed to be in a less secure position in their future and more likely to suffer hunger, to suffer pain, to suffer loss, to not be in the position of being the king, right? They are more likely to have divine find retribution placed on them, because know that the Greeks know that the gods are pernicious and vindictive, and they might take their rage out on your children to spite you, and they might die. And lastly, this is pure internal torture at the point where you do this. Because note you have mixed feelings about this person, right? He's the father of your children. You understood him, you loved him for very many years, right? Even if you don't, you have some code of morality, some code of divine right. Blood murder is very horrible and looked down upon. You become the villain that George describes, and you fear what might happen. You're probably not going to live to see the consequences of your actions, but before you die, every thought that you have will be, what is happening to my children? Who is going to try to usurp their place? Who is going to act as a regent in their stead while their under agents holding the throne? Who is going to try to usurp their power? Who is going to try to sway them against their own country? You are going to die very soon. You're going to die in anguish, and you're going to make your children suffer just for the sake of revenge that is probably going to come at the hands of the gods anyways later on. For these reasons, proud to oppose.
Thanks, Peter. Keeping Prime Minister defending it.
Ready? No, Žnidar, she don't have insight into the books, but she have insights towards the beliefs which she have towards the Olympus, the beliefs in the religiosity, the beliefs in the currently existing morality, to the curses which are around her, and towards the prophecies which will happen again and again and again to her remaining 3 kids. Therefore, I don't think that their framing is relevant in this debate. Few things in my speech. Firstly, about the justice towards the daughter. I think you just reached your expiration date that the sacrifice of the daughter didn't went to the ashes, right? You waited 10 years, he got the good wins, you feel that at this point, the prosperity of your society, it's okay, but you're like, I don't know what will happen in the future. If the next prophecy will say that I should kill the next children, what if I will be the dedicated one that I need to harm the other person? The trade-off in this case is there is this guy who was gone for 10 years, who is the king, who was probably abusive towards me in the past, who brought another wife here, who now gave the prosperity to the country, versus the 3 remaining kids, which I spent the last 10 years with, which I have emotional attachment towards, to which I have obligation as a mother, which is something universally agreed that this is something necessarily important. Therefore, I'm more scared what will happen to me in the eternity after I will die, and how I will be therefore perceived by the gods if I will be punished. I don't know, and this is extremely speculative, if the generals will kill me or not. I don't know if they will overthrow me or not. I don't know if my son or someone retaliate against me, but the moment when I will be dying, I will be feeling that I gave the justice towards my daughter, and that I did something that I will be remembered forever, and I will give the good legacy towards the people. I don't care about the practical benefits, because as I said, a lot of things might happen, right? If I will not kill him, he can put Cassandra instead of me, he can kick me out of the mountain, he can literally sacrifice me the next time. He could probably take down all of the happiness of my life, which probably is also already limited. However, in terms of the morality, in terms of like how people perceiving it's eye for an eye, and this is the only proportionate response which you can stop, or you can say that this is something which you need to do in order to protect yourself in the future. Then they said, but you need to care about your 3 other kids. I think if you are one of the other 3 kids, you are like, what if I will be next one? What if my own parents will be able to sacrifice me for a successful win or whatever other benefits for the society? That means that they live in fear, they probably don't trust you, and I'm not sure why this is comparatively better on their side of the house, that maybe they will have some new auntie or some grandma which will take care of them even if you will be killed, right? So I think from your perspective, you care about the principle, you care about what's actually happening. Then they are talking about the internal torture. And I'm like, what internal torture? Literally, the guy killed your kid, literally thrown away from the cliff. And if you are saying that people were sacrificing innocent over and over again, I'm not sure why you as a woman now, you will be like, no, but they can do whatever the fuck they want. I will have this internal torture which will be chasing me forever. I think the symbol which you are showing is that you are dying at what happened actually, as the woman who fought for the rights, who will be remembered as the strong one who protected the legacy of the children and who therefore showed how the justice can be executed. I think it's extremely important to show that she also took care that the sacrifice of the daughter will not go to nothing, because it wasn't that she killed him immediately after. She still let the expedition to continue, right? And therefore, when he came back with another woman, she's like, I'm not sure if it was worth it. I'm not sure if this potential prosperity which we brought, even if we won the war, it's something which satisfies me personally. This is an actor motion. So even if for the people it will be later more money potentially, it will be more resources, maybe they will have a little bit better quality of life. If you lost part of yourself, if you lost your daughter, I'm not sure if you can ever recover from this, because every single time when you look for your other children, or if you look in the mirror, you think about this and you see the scene like how he throwing her away from the cliff, right? I think this is more internal torture than what potentially they are talking about. Therefore, I think the moment when you are taking the power into your hands, when you're taking the ownership, you believe and you are dying in the thinking that at least in the future, at least in my afterlife, at least in the eternity, I will get reward for this. And second of all, that my future kids will not get punished because the curse will not be posed under the family. Because even if you will get the prophecy, even if you sacrifice, you don't know what the payback the gods will ask you in the future. In this case, you feel that you are giving them payback back. You literally taking away the man who technically made the atrocity. Before I will move on to closing, what's your extension?
So maybe it is immoral to slam out a baby off a cliff for prosperity. But when a 10 toes down in a war and fell for the greatest scam of all time, surely the situation is different?
Yeah, but this is, again, the actor motion. I don't know why you care about the war in particular, but I think the most intuitive thing is that you care about your kids and you care about your future and you care what will happen to you and how people will perceive you, right? I don't think that you will ever get the respect from anyone, even if you would care about this, if you would let someone get away with murdering the member of your family. I think at this point, you are like, this man disrespected me. This man, after 10 years, brings someone else. Maybe he will have another kids with, I prioritize myself and something which I think about myself. I think it's about the self-respect, right? I cannot imagine Kay actually living with herself until the end of their life and looking how the prosperity, how the kingdom it's raising, just because her kid was being planted literally as like the seed which was a sacrificial lamb in order to do this. Every single day when you are going to buy things on the market, every single day when you are seeing people trading, you see that kid actually being part of the deal. Therefore, I think your life is already terrible. I think you're thinking about this. This is something which is very proximate to you. And therefore, you think how I can make my life better, how I can make myself feel better, how I can justify to myself that the sacrifice of my daughter was actually worth it. I can kill her murderer. I can make sure that in the future, I will get some rewards from God, or at least I will not get double punished. I will not get double victimization. But second of all, at least the other 3 remaining kids will not share the same type of life. They will not be living with the Cassandra, the new girlie, or they will not be thrown away as the another prophecy will come if the prosperity or if the another war will pop in. Therefore, A, you have 0 obligation or 0 attachment to the man which you are actually killing. He was gone for 10 years. It's unclear what's your relation to him now. But you have obligation towards yourself and towards your beliefs. And I think George proved you clearly why in the ancient Greeks the beliefs and the priorities which you had was posthumous fame and what you want to have, and the different standards of the morality. So even therefore, you are legitimate in order to make the decision to kill him, regardless of the consequences. You might die after, we don't care. You might be overthrown, we don't care. But you will be dying as a proud woman which did the right thing for her child and for her future family.
And thank the speaker for that speech. If you did an opposition, it goes off opening up.
Do you know people say Bulgari, you Nazi, and then the Iona guys are like, why are you saying Nazi? Okay. And I wish all the scum of the earth had one neck and that I had my hands on it. Do you know who said this? Karl Pranzom. He was a serial killer, a vigilante who took justice in his own hands. An evil man, not excused by the evil of the world around him. Firstly, responding to their point about why you perceive this as a morally necessary thing. Their only point is he was a bad guy. 4 reasons why him being a bad guy does not make your decision the correct one and the worthwhile one. And it's like their entire case. The first is, even if he was bad, that does not mean that it is you who ought to take vengeance upon him. The gods know how to take vengeance. The gods are fickle and vindictive. They can place against him and fight against him. It does not mean that your hands ought to have blood upon them because of this, because he has prophecies that will come against him in these unfamiliar ways. But secondly, it's very important. It's like, even if you believe that you are the one who should do it, that does not mean that you believe your action is the legitimate one. Their entire analysis proves this. You can have hubris coming back against you, even if there is good reason for your action. The hubris can be on her this time, that she may have a good reason to avenge someone, but it's still an evil action, moving against the gods, doing an awful thing, blood murder in this particular capacity. Their own analysis explains it. But thirdly, I think you do care about the war. I think it is more complex than they talk about. You are the queen in this kind of capacity. These are your people. These are people you often care about. You've interacted with many of these soldiers in this capacity. You've been brought up around them. And look, this may seem unintuitive to us now, but you've been raised all your life as queen. That your greatest obligation is to the country around you, to those people around you, that they are as your children, and that you have great obligation towards them. He saved them in this kind of sense. He acted for them in this particular capacity. But fourthly and finally, how do people treat kings in this time? Kings are chosen by the god at birth, blessed to know the right thing, to take right actions. And even if you can't conceptualize them, very often these actions could be correct. So very often you believe that he followed through on the desires of the gods, on the duty of the gods, that you are likely to believe that this was some action that had some purpose towards it. But fifthly, like, even if you hate him, love and hate are often complex feelings. You hate because you often loved so much, because you love this person, because he's the father of your children. How does it feel to murder the father of your children, to take away from them this particular thing? Maybe it seems simple because he's a murderer, but it's often not in this capacity. It is a massive burden upon you. So how do you die? They say you die in dignity. No, you die in self-doubt. You die in fear that you will go to the deepest bowels of Hades and that you'll never see another day of happiness in this particular case, but also that you have done the wrong thing, that you have failed the world around you. Second important harm, the harm on your children, of which you massively care about. This is something they barely engage with. All they say is one sentence, which is, but he could kill them in the future in this kind of particular capacity. That could happen. Why is this unlikely? Look, I can't predict whether the god will randomly tell you murder your children in the future. I'm not that good a debater, but I can try, right? Firstly, note that gods often require one-time things like sacrifices out of people, or at least they perceive it's like this. Why? Because they've already proven their loyalty to the gods, because they've proven their devotion in this particular capacity. So this test often happens. Mega high-level analysis, I know. I'm impressed as well in this particular capacity. But also secondly, like, okay, we're comparing total uncertainties. This guy's capable of murdering your children. The next guy is also capable of murdering your children if the gods tell him. Like, your child can take the throne and the gods could tell him to kill all of his brothers, right? Many people follow the duties of the gods, but what's the asymmetry? There are people who now have an incentive to kill him, where your children represent threats to the throne, future kings who want to murder everyone, who want to murder a person who has done regicide because they're scared they'll get regicided in this capacity, foreign nations who want to take advantage of instability in this particular case. These are the asymmetries if we want to be debating these kinds of impossible things. And you care massively about your children, about not only the perception of what will happen to them, but about whether this will actually happen to them, right? Like, even if we prove that maybe you think your children will be safe if you murder him, if they actually die because of this, that's something the actor greatly cares about. That is something that matters. Your children are more likely to be hung and their heads put on a spike in the street on the comparative side. Before I continue, closing.
Yeah, Alek, ancient Greece was very famously a highly violent and low-trust society. How often do you think heroic extrajudicial violence shows up in the myths?
Well, not against the king beloved for his great victory against our enemies, who showed his love to us for sacrificing his own child so that we may have safe passage home in this capacity. I don't think they'll go like, what a great guy you are for murdering our beloved fearless leader. Let's go for that in this particular capacity. But like, even if they love you, like, you aren't gonna love yourself in this way. And also your opening already proved this is massively important. Third important mechanism on what will happen to you. Because I know that this is a metric that is undervalued in this debate, but it matters greatly. Like, okay, maybe it matters how you think of yourself as you die, but it also matters that you're able to play with your children 1 second more, that you're able to get these beautiful memories again, that you're able to spend time with them, that you're able to shape their lives in the ways you wish to shape their lives, in all of these things, like to raise them to be the people you want to raise them. What is the reason why there's danger for you? Because Cassandra will come and Cassandra will take over. 3 responses to this. The first is, I don't know how much we can use the book, but apparently we agreed we can use the book, so let's go for that. Cassandra is a slave. Cassandra does not have a legitimate right to be queen. She cannot be placed as queen. Who the fuck knows if we can use the book, right? I'm not a CA, I'm not no judge or nothing boring like this. Second response, like, he's unlikely to do this. Why? Firstly, because he also has some affection towards you the same way you have towards him. You're the mother of his children. He has cooperated with you on a great many things. He often doesn't want to, like, murder you and put someone else in. Also, thirdly, think of how this will look. That the king murders the rightful queen in order to place his new lover in this particular capacity. Fucking Henry VII, the fat guy, almost got in wars multiple times because of this particular order. If it's Henry VIII, the same shit. I don't know, British history, an interesting country to me in this capacity. So it's highly unlikely that this occurs. But when will it occur, right? It occurs when you are seen as the person who has done the terrible action, but also as a person who wants to benefit from this action, wants to become queen regent, is the person who has to be taken out of control in order for new people to take advantage of this particular capacity. Also, secondly, let's say you do ever get removed by Cassandra, right? It's not the same thing, because like Cassandra will never, if they, even if they put in Cassandra, he will always love his children. He will always try to push them through and put them through. But if you're removed, the people see your children as people who grow up and try to avenge you. So they want to slit their throats while they're still little to seize power in this particular capacity. All those generals loyal to Agamemnon, all those people who would have a problem with you, vote us!
Are you hearing me? Let's go. Clytemnestra did not kill Agamemnon when he sacrificed Iphigenia. She could have snuck into his bedchamber before he went to war, poisoned his chalice, but he chose not to. She killed him when he returned, when she learned of his atrocities in Troy, of his underhand and dishonorable tactics of trickery, of the shame that he had brought by staining the altar of the gods with the blood of innocent children. Nobody listened to the poem except maybe us and CEO. Opening half is orthogonal to the debate. We will run the real extension, that this is necessary to punish Agamemnon for the atrocities he committed during the war, restore justice and secure your place in Elysium, fulfill your moral obligation to your children and to society. The first claim that I want to make is that he did commit these atrocities. This motion is not a fictional world, it's real history, so we will, throw the book at you. We all know the story of the Trojan horse, great trickery. We remember how in this story, you offered this as an offering. You gave up, you conceded the war. This was supposed to be a sign of peace, a sign of cooperation. But instead, you snuck soldiers into the city, a baseless act of treachery in which you snuck in and murdered sleeping, defenseless people. Secondly, Agamemnon engaged in great brutality once he entered the city of Troy. Why do we celebrate Odysseus and not Agamemnon? Because even by the moral standards of the Greeks, what he did was brutal. Because once he entered the city, he murdered innocent and defenseless women and children. And he did not just murder these people in their homes, he murdered them when they fled to the one safe place in Greece, to the altar of the gods that must never be stained by blood, to which you can never bring a weapon. So great atrocities were committed, and these were quite significant. And I know what they're going to say. It's okay to kill children in Greece. I do not think that this is true. We think that this is immoral by the standards of the time. Why is this the case? First, Greece is a society of honor and values. It was the birthplace of virtue, of Socrates, of Aristotle. This was their legacy. This was what made them a great civilization. Notice that they sharply defined themselves by these virtues of wisdom and justice even in the face of war. Like Greek states went to war constantly, but they still had gods like Athena, gods of justice. They developed just war theory. Compare this to like civilizations like the Norse who had gods for trickery. The equivalent did not exist. So you sharply define yourself not by this standard of moral relativism, but by absolute virtue. Now I know what they're going to say. Oh, the gods in Greek mythology, they engaged in trickery as well. But gods in Greek mythology were complex. They were not seen as paragons of virtue, but rather as complex characters. Their stories of trickery were supposed to be stories to convince us not to engage in trickery ourselves. But secondly, there's a double standard for us humans. Sisyphus, Iphigenia, these are the people who try to trick the gods, and where they're right now, they're in hell. They're like pushing boulders up for the rest of time. So clearly, when you put up the white flag of surrender, something invented by the Greeks, when you concede war, that means you must uphold virtue by not engaging in further trickery. Secondly, we think that this is morally significant also in a secular sense, and this is important. The altar of the gods is not just important for holy reasons, although I've just proven this. It was a neutral zone to which innocents could flee during times of war. Historically, Greeks were warring states, and they had an incentive to create such spaces because you need not want to engage in ceaseless and unnecessary brutality and to further worsen the worst impacts of war. You didn't want people to kill the heirs of royal families so that you had succession battles and blood feuds, which is why these neutral third spaces where we could have civilian protection were created. What have you done now? You have violated the safety that these places were supposed to provide to innocents. You have killed women and children at the altar of a god. Would you let a war criminal, somebody who had killed hundreds of innocent women and children into your home, somebody who was an absentee father for 10 years, who you had never met, who you now view as this individual? Obviously, you would not do this. So even by the standards of secular morality, it is clearly the case that none of us would accept this, that we would kill this person. Thirdly, sacrificing children is one thing. Maybe it was acceptable. Killing children is not. Notice that the acts of Agamemnon in the city of Troy were baseless acts that had no virtue and had no moral value. They were not sanctioned by the gods. He did not benefit from them. Why did he take 10 years to get back to Troy? Because he was being punished for these crimes and atrocities in the first place. This had no benefit to him. These children and women were not a threat to his soldiers. Notice that the gods of war in Greek mythology were complex. You had Athena, a paragon of virtue, and you had Ares, the symbol of bloodlust. But what city are we in right now, guys? Who has a city named after them, right? It is the paragon of virtue, the originator of just war theory. Secondly, Mycenaeans were not the most bloodthirsty Greek states. Like, they weren't like Spartans who left their children to die in order to create stronger soldiers. Their patron god was Zeus. So for that reason, we think they hold themselves to higher moral standards compared to their immediate neighbors as well. Another reason, they might say that this is simply an act of omission. You did not commit these crimes as the wife. You are simply failing to punish this person. Before that, closing.
Odysseus did the Trojan horse, and the gods will punish Agamemnon in hell like they did Odysseus. But you are not a god, you're the daughter of Sparta.
I will respond to this in this. The first claim is factually untrue. No, thank you. He did, mastermind the Trojan horse. We think Odysseus should be punished for this as well. We would kill him too. Final reason, moral obligations as a woman in Greece. We flip opening opposition here. We agree, you care about war, but it's precisely for that reason that you should do this. First, you hold army generals to particularly high moral standards. This is because all the stories we have heard of brutality of Henry VIII are like stories for why we should not have despots. This is why Greek mythology has developed the ideas of Midas, who was punished for his pride, of kings like Minos. So clearly you do hold them to high moral standards. No, thank you. Why do we think you have this moral obligation? First, women and men had sharply defined moral roles in Greek society. Hestia was the goddess of the hearth. Women modeled themselves and their moral conduct around her. And you know what the most terrible thing to do to your own home, to your own hearth is? It is to invite war criminals into it. It is to pollute and stain the moral standards of your family, of your home. Because the unit of social organization that you had in Greek society was the family. This is why Greek mythology is built around a family of people. This is why it was so important that you fulfill this virtue of protecting the home and the hearth. It was as important as being a just king was to a man. So allowing murder to pollute the hearth was very, very bad. You probably view yourself as an instrument of God, as divine inspiration, given that this was very common at the time. Second reason, you morally corrupt your children. They're probably correct, like average life expectancy for most children at the time was quite low. We don't know if they would have died in other ways. What we do know is their father would return. And who is their father? He's a war criminal. He's bloodthirsty. He doesn't care about the gods. He doesn't care about virtue. And what is the role of a father in Greek society? It is to train the prince in the art of war. You create more bloodthirsty kings, which fails your society and fails your children, who will suffer in hell as a result. I want to preempt the claim that they make that obviously this was not immoral because the moral standards that Agamemnon would have held himself to would have been high, but the moral standards changed. He went to war for 10 years. He saw his comrades die. Opening opposition concedes this, but this doesn't make it okay. It just means that you find ways to rationalize it to yourself, that you tell yourself this is okay, that you think the gods have abandoned you because you were failing in Troy until the Trojan horse, and therefore you resort to trickery because this was the only means of success. So, if you believe that you will enjoy the fruits of Elysium, and if you believe otherwise you will go to hell, you will support closing government.
I thank the speaker for that speech. Member of opposition, continue.
I'm firstly going to wash out all of the stuff on gods that happens in the rest of the debate. Like, you'll get punished one way or the other. All of this stuff is actually incredibly high burden, and no one decides to prove anything. So this takes out a top half, I suppose, and probably CG as well. So they're like, oh, the gods will be mad at you either way, or, you know, the gods will punish Agamemnon anyway, blah, blah, blah. So the problem is that obviously there is no objective system of morality or immorality in ancient Greek society. And in fact, the judgment of the gods is rivalrous. That is to say that there are many gods with different preferences. They form different factions. And so it's not that, like, one of them thinks that this is really moral or immoral. They're just all following their own disparate interests. So why is it the case that it's very difficult to prove either way? Firstly, there are pro-Troy and anti-Troy gods. So there are a bunch of pro-Troy gods that are very powerful, like Aphrodite. And in fact, after the Trojan War, Zeus made a lot of concessions to the pro-Troy gods because they're the ones that got fucked over, which is why, for example, Aphrodite got concessions vis-a-vis Aeneas going to found to Rome. That's spec, but obviously the general mechanism holds. Secondly, Clytemnestra also has gods on her side. She's a Spartan princess. She's been brought up as a royal, and so she believes that she's divinely protected because you believe that you have a divine mandate, right? Like that's why you were put in that position in the first place. Chanidu is also like, oh, the gods invented just war theory. No, they're not fucking Grotius, right? They're not writing treatises on like how to treat prisoners of fucking war. They're going like sliming out hundreds of thousands of people for the heck of it. The gods this is just very silly. Sorry, Chanidu. So the upshot of this is that some gods are probably going to try and block the punishment of Clytemnestra, but actually in either case, it's so super difficult to prove this claim, and the burden isn't met. Sure, Chanidu, go on.
Yeah, our claim is not about whether gods will enact revenge on you. It's about the moral standards that you infer from Greek mythology, which is what proves
there are no moral standards to infer from Greek mythology for the simple reasons that I've already said. First extension I'm going to prove substantively is why you're actually going to get found out for killing Agamemnon. So I just want to note that 90% of the opening opposition impacts are completely contingent on this premise. They give terrible reasoning for this. So they give two reasons. The first is people think you're the only one that has motive, and the second one is they think you're the one who probably did it. Huh? So there are two problems with this. Firstly, this is completely asserted, and all of the reasons are actually prima facie implausible. Like, you're the one that presumably has like the least motive. Like, why would people assume you have the motive? Secondly, they don't actually prove this to sufficiency, right? Like, that you believe this sufficiently to take the enormous step of sliming out the queen of your state, and therefore having like massive instability. All they prove really is that you're a suspect. They don't prove that people actually believe that you're the one that did it. So I'm going to give you a bunch of better reasons to believe that people will believe that you're the one who did it. Firstly, you have thousands of servants in your home. The reason why is because in ancient societies, you needed lots and lots of manpower to cook the food, to clean the clothes, to do all of the kind of stuff that is automated these days. And the problem with that is that now you have a bunch of sets of eyeballs daily walking through your house 24/7. And it's, by the way, it's really hard to clean blood. Like, you know, like all the people that they found out of killing people because they Googled like, can I use Clorox to like wash out blood from my sheets? In the ancient world, they didn't have bleach. You just had to like scrub at that shit until it went out. It's really difficult. It stains. So like all you need is one servant to notice, whoa, what the fuck? There's a bunch of blood here. Like someone's desperately tried to scrub out. Huh? Like they're probably gonna think like that's fucked up. You probably killed Agamemnon. So they're probably going to sell you out because one, they can extract political and monetary concessions for it. All they need to do is just go up to another rival person being like, yo, I think Clytemnestra slimed out her husband. And like, I'm giving this information in response for like, 20 lira or whatever. Secondly, they'll just be shocked and probably not want to work for someone who killed their own husband, and so they'll sell Clytemnestra out. Secondly, Clytemnestra needs compatriots to commit this crime. The reason why is very simple, but by the way, like she does, like with, she uses Aegisthus, I think, and some other people in the book, but the structural reason why you need compatriots is because this is Agamemnon, one of the strongest people in all of the lands. He's very, very buff, he's just been killing a bunch of people in Troy, and so you as Clytemnestra can't kill Agamemnon by yourself, and so you're likely need help. You're also likely need help on the like cleaning the blood stage, which is, which multiplies the people involved, and these people go to the tavern, they get drunk off of like goblets of wine, they're probably going to brag to their friends because this is like, oh, I killed the greatest warrior in the land, and so someone is likely to find out. It's already in the status quo very, very difficult to hide these kinds of things, probably far more difficult in the ancient world. Finally, misogyny, people just assume that you did it. The simple reason why is because there are lots of examples of treacherous women in ancient Greek mythology. You're probably likely to be brought up on that. And so people will just kind of think that you were the treacherous woman who killed your husband. So this is far better reasoning, at least than opening opposition, as to why you'll be found out. No. Next extension. Why your life afterwards, if you do kill Agamemnon, is likely to be way worse. So opening opposition has a bit of a problem on the comparative, because they, I think, very well prove that your life is going to suck if you do kill, if you don't kill, no. How does this work? No. They prove one side of the comparative. They don't actually prove why your life with Agamemnon is actually going to be good, right? So this is the comparative they don't prove. Why is your life with Agamemnon actually in your interest, and why is it sufficient to outweigh the interest that GovBench says? The only claim here is on instability. No, your eldest son Orestes becomes the king, obviously. So I don't know what succession crisis they're talking about. It's very simple, and it has happened for thousands of years. And the other reason why this extension is important is because even if you don't get killed, so even if you don't believe that clash, which is the best case side on Gov, we prove that your life is going to be way better if Agamemnon is alive. The premise is this. You need Agamemnon's popularity and his reputation to have any power at all in this kingdom. The context is this. Political and military strength in ancient societies came from support from local elites and generals. The reason why is because you don't have a standing army. Until 1700, right, like the vast majority of states pulled their military capacity as volunteers from local elites. Those elites run the farms. They're the ones that pay the taxes. They produce economically. You actually don't have that much force and strength on your own. You have to rely on the cooperation of other people. And note, in the ancient world, support is overwhelmingly personal. It is alliances, negotiations, evenings spent over the hearth, eating some mutton and stuff that you've built over decades and decades of being the monarch. And especially the case that loyalty is built up after a 10-year war, right? So you've fought with these men for over 10 years, which is why all the elites that come back to this kingdom are incredibly, they're willing to die for Agamemnon. They've proven that they're willing to die for Agamemnon, and so they're far more likely to commit the troops necessary, commit the taxes necessary to actually keep that state running. They are far less likely to support the new king, insofar as loyalty is contingent on one, personal qualities that the person has developed and come to recognize over time, and secondly, a history of success, being a successful general. Orestes has not proven that he's a successful general, and so these people are far more reticent to give them the requisite support. The upshot is this. Firstly, your vassal states are likely to rebel, insofar as you're less likely to impose security over them, and also because they don't like you as much. Secondly, you get invaded. This is an incredibly precarious time in ancient Greek history. City-states are slamming each other out all the time. You need as many hands on spears as you can get. You get far less of that on our side, so you're likely to live a shitty life if you kill Agamemnon, but you'll live a good life if you don't. For those reasons, very proud.
Thanks, speakers, for that speech. Lovely to close out the coverage.
Much like Agamemnon, closing opposition's attempt to seize victory ultimately sows the seeds of their own demise. Because I think the responses that Aidan tries to make to the material Chanidu gives you ends up reinforcing our case and proving why closing government ultimately wins. 2 responses to rebuild. First, Aidan is right. The gods made concessions to the Trojans. There were several gods, powerful gods like Poseidon, who were actually on the Trojan side of the war. And you know what this means? This means that when Agamemnon slaughtered the children of the Trojan royal house on the altar of Zeus in Troy, that is when the gods turned against Agamemnon. That is when the gods forsook him. This is why you have the obligation to go and kill your husband, because he is no longer your husband. He has been damned in the eyes of God. So their reason undermines their case, proves ours. Second, there are some things that are common to all gods, even if gods have like countervailing incentives. One very common thing to all gods is the sanctity of altars. Why is the case? From a godly perspective, they want sacrifices and prayer to continue unabated, regardless of what war is happening. But from a Greek nobility perspective, and this is what Chanidu analyzes and closing opposition doesn't respond, it is very useful to have neutral spaces to go to in times of conflict, because when you fight for conflict, you want to have something left after you're done with the fight. You want to kill everyone, right? This is why conflicts happen in a limited sense. Agamemnon has broken this most sacred compact in Troy. This is why he must die. Okay, why then do we think that we win? A couple of things that I'm going to do in this speech. First, I'm going to prove to you why we critically provide the morality obligation mechanisms that opening government doesn't. Second, I'm going to prove why morality is the most important thing in this round. And finally, I will do some extraneous responses to closing opposition to conclusively take them out. Okay, firstly then, how do we weigh over our opening government? And this is where I'm going to whip the extension that Chanidu gives, which really is quite excellent. 2 things. First, opening government and opening opposition have this back and forth about whether or not the sacrifice of Iphigenia was a good or a bad thing. And this clash sort of hinges the opening half morality question. We sidestep this clash for a far more certain moral impact, where we tell you what's probably more important is whether or not the gods had certain absolute standards and whether or not Agamemnon actually violated them. Insofar as Chanidu gives you many, many good reasons for why Agamemnon violated these standards and why these standards exist, we think that then holds. But second, I think even if opening government successfully proves, and you buy this case that, the sacrifice was enough to make Agamemnon deserve death, opening government has a further missing burden where they don't prove why you as his wife have the responsibility to kill him. We prove this in Chanidu's speech, where he tells you about how the role of the woman is to maintain the sanctity of the household. And at the point where you let in an individual who has bespoiled the most valued tenets, the most sacred tenets of the gods into your household, you are besmirching your own household, and critically, you are besmirching the moral value of your own children. So if this debate is actually about how other people perceive you, if Chanidu successfully proves to you that you have done a very, very bad moral thing by letting Agamemnon in, and Agamemnon has bespoiled the good virtue of your bloodline, it is on their side where more people are likely to rise up against you and kill your children, because they view these children as the progeny of a very, very evil and horrific individual. This is why Chanidu's extension is so debate-winning, and I think we're already beating opening government. Now, why is the morality so important? 2 things to say here. Even if morality in abstract, as closing opposition says, is somewhat ambiguous, we gave you overriding reasons why there definitely is a moral obligation that you as Clytemenestra feel after what Agamemnon has done. And we think the very solid intuition for this as to why you felt this is very simple. In the actual Iliad, as Homer tells us, you did not kill him when he sacrificed your daughter. It's when he came back with his hands stained with the blood of the children of Troy that you then decided to kill him. So therefore, you felt a strong moral obligation. Second, our reasons actually unlock opening government's impact of you believe that you will go to Tartarus and you will be locked in the pits of Hades, if you don't kill Agamemnon. Therefore, this is a far more important impact that you as Clytemnestra consider over potentially your children getting killed in a practical sense, or you not being able to be queen or whatever, because Tartarus is forever. Look at Sisyphus forced to roll a massive boulder up a hill and be squashed by that boulder as it rolls down over him until the literal end of time. That is horrific. And insofar as you as an ancient Greek woman are very pious and believe in all of these gods, that is the most overriding incentive in this debate. Yet another reason why Chanidu wins. Now, some responses to closing opposition. Broadly, I just want to note that Agamemnon was not actually a beloved king, and I don't actually know why both the opposition teams engage in this lie. 3 reasons why this is not true. First, I want to note that Agamemnon was a very brutal king. He treated his peasants incredibly harshly. Why do we know this to be true? Even if you didn't read the Iliad, it's insofar as per the poem that we got, he committed horrific atrocities in Troy. These bad character traits and this brutality carried over to his regular reign as a king as well. This is why, for example, Odysseus was actually welcomed back by his people, whereas the reception of Agamemnon would have been far more lukewarm. Second, yes, it is true that many individuals fought with Agamemnon. Here's the critical part. Most of the volunteers who went to sail across the sea and go to Troy with Agamemnon are now dead. And for what? Because Helen, who we have now got back to Greece, is not actually Agamemnon's wife. She's going to be the wife of another Greek king. So essentially, this is where we unlock the hubris clash on top half. Because in Agamemnon's hubris, he sent his own men, the men of Crete, to go to Troy and die for another Greek king's wife. It's not even like a Cretan, it's not even a Cretan princess that you're trying to bring back, right? So at this point, it's very unclear whether or not the generals who have come back are actually willing to die for Agamemnon. Also because he has just despoiled all of these things in Troy. It's very unclear how their morality works in that case. Third, I just think that we know that there's a high chance that Agamemnon was indeed very unpopular. Per CEO's own analysis, Clytemnestra had assistance in killing him. Clearly there were many people within the palace who didn't want him. Yes?
Even if you're certain that moral duty exists, ask yourself, panel, is there anything your mother would not do to protect the future and lives of you and your siblings? This is your proximate moral duty.
Correct. And Chanidu's extension flips your analysis on its head, because we proved to you that it's not just your moral obligation, it is the good honor and virtue of your entire bloodline. At the point we do not right this horrific, monstrous wrong, that is when your children will be seen as the sons and daughters of a horrific, vile man who nobody should ever listen to, who should ideally be killed to exterminate this rotten and blackened bloodline. This is the part of analysis that Chanidu gives you, so we're winning both on the principal front as well as on the front of the children. I want to leave you with this. Agamemnon has bespoiled and blackened the altar of Zeus in Troy with the blood of little Trojan children. The only way to wash this blood off of your bloodline, to wash this blood off of yourself and all your future generations, is to hew his head off with an axe, as Iliad tells us in the Homer, and spill his blood over the oaken floors of your own palace. And in that moment, when the blade connects with his neck, when steel and human flesh and time and filthy, filthy blood become one, that is when you as Clytemnestra know this is the only thing that matters in this debate. This is why we win.
I thank the speaker for that speech. Opposition whip to close out the debate.
I love the way Hans speaks, even when he's talking out of his ass. The first half of my speech will prove why you have no perception of moral obligation, and why either you getting killed or having a fine life, O's comparative, is by far the most important clash in this debate. The second half of my speech will prove why we do those things better than anyone else. There are two parts to the CG case. Part one is that the gods will care, and part two is that it follows you have a moral obligation to swing the axe. I will give 3 responses and prove why this sufficiently undermines both premises of CG's case. 1. You are the daughter of Sparta, guarded by Ares. Note, this is the god you care about the most. You are royalty. You are guarded directly by Ares. Ares is not Hesia. You are not a peasant who is bound by the feminine duties of the other people. You are privileged and selfish as fuck. And as a consequence, your obligations don't stem from you being a woman. They stem from being a queen, a daughter of Sparta. Second, your god specifically gives you a different moral obligation to the ones that CG points to. That, all the gods care. Because one of the big things about Ares was that he was very willing to be quite slimy when it came to undermining things like Athens, Athena, etc. And so if this is the god that you care about the most, it is unclear why this gives you a sufficient moral obligation, point number 2, and why this god cares, point number 1, on their premise. Second, as Aidan points out, the gods are rivalrous. The response we get from Hans is that, yeah, but they still agree on things like not spilling blood on the altar. Ask yourselves, does that prove that I, as Clytemnestra, should do the act of axing? No, it proves that he will be punished when he dies. And he can die however the fuck he wants to die. If he was as unpopular as they talk about, then maybe he will die from the hands of people who generally view this act as being quite bad, right? Maybe other women are also morally obliged to carry out this act. It is unclear why you must carry out this act yourself. And I think this is significant, right? Because it means that even if they're able to prove that the gods care about things like spilling blood on the altar, it doesn't follow that this gives you an obligation. Because the only claim that you have for why an obligation follows is the stuff on Hesia, which I beat by the first analysis. And I would note, this is sufficient to already take it over closing government, right? Because firstly, it shows that sun gods don't care, and second, that moral obligations aren't construed. But the last thing I'll say is, moral obligations are perceived, right? Even if they can prove that you have a moral obligation, it is unclear why you perceive this moral obligation on their side of the house. And crucially, I think you don't perceive this moral obligation on their side. Why? First of all, you have grown up a life of spoils and privilege, right? You lived in Sparta before you were married off in Mycenae. And this was a life that was often justified as a consequence of the killings of wives and children on their side of the house. So your husband doing this is not a shock to you. It is not something that actively revolts you or makes your system feel incredibly worse. And the response they give is, but then she would have killed him in the first place back then. Maybe it was just hard to kill him back then, right? Like, do we consider this? Maybe he left immediately after doing the sacrifice, which is what actually happened. So this is not a logical link that you can follow from closing government. They are clearly out. The next thing I want to prove is, in general, this moral clash is less important in this debate. And the reason why is quite simple. As a consequence of you, A, being someone who grew up in quite strong material conditions, and B, being someone who grew up in a world where the horrors of war were justified around you quite significantly, and C, all the things that opening government and opening opposition talk about in terms of gods being deeply unclear in this round, I think the best thing that we can defer to is that you value your own life. You value living. You value the fact that you getting killed will probably mean that you can't enjoy these things in the future, or that you can't exact other forms of retribution that might be good. Maybe instead of killing Agamemnon, we should spend time giving reparations to the Trojans on their side of the house. This is a counter model we can defend, right? So these are all things that you can no longer do on their side of the house. The next thing that we get, and this is the bench weighing that I think Peter starts to do as well, is that, but like clearly you care about your children more than you care about death. I have two responses to this, and again, this will weigh why our extension was the most important. Response number one, instability is actually not proven by opening opposition. Like, it is actually very unclear why instability happens, because the rule of secession was very, very clearly and formally defined at this time. In reality, Orestes killed you because he knew you could take the throne after Agamemnon was slimed out. He was given the throne almost immediately afterwards. So there's zero fucking instability that actually happens, especially because you've just defeated the biggest causers of instability, right? You just came back from a war that is giving you peace for the next little while on their side of the house. So instability is not a significant consideration in this debate. Your children live fine lives. Why then did we prove that you die, and you will die in a much more likely manner than opening opposition does? Firstly, as we point out, there are a variety of ways in which you get found out that are significant to then proving that you will get killed, right? Things like the fact that there's people around you that are willing to betray you. Things like the fact that you will, like the act of killing is one that is very hard to hide. We get responses from closing government. First response we get is that Agamemnon was not a beloved king, asserted. InfoSide calls him a legendary king. Second, Agamemnon was a brutal king, but I think structurally you couldn't rule brutally. They quote the Iliad here, but the reason why it's very unlikely you could rule brutally is because at the time you weren't reliant on things like a standing army. So you had to make sure that people were sufficiently paid. You had to make sure that the people that came to you to fight were sufficiently happy to fight with you. You had to do things like build glory around you, which is why when Agamemnon came back, he was incredibly popular. And it is in the same book that Hans tries to lie about. The next thing they say is that he was unpopular because clearly she worked with Augustus, so at least one person didn't want to work with him. Augustus just wanted to pipe that. As a consequence, he sided with her. That's not sufficient analysis to prove that he wasn't unpopular. The last thing they say is that everyone who worked with him was dead. This is untrue, but also, like, everyone at home was, like, unaware of all the brutalities he caused when he came back. They did know that they just guaranteed peace from the Turkish people who they hated deeply, so they really, really loved him significantly on their side of the house. Yeah, opening.
We gave you analysis on posthumous and anterior salvation, which are not contingent on the practical speculations. We gave the guarantee actor about some justice and some
Sorry, I've already proven why the posthumous anterior salvation stuff is actual nonsense, right? So this is the thing that you weigh on much, much more. So none of these reasons actually prove that you won't get killed, and also none of these reasons actually defeat the fact that we give you reasons for why it is like specifically this thing that will get you killed, right? The act of getting found out that will get you killed. That's the number one most important contribution. The number two most important contribution is the fact that you will live a fine life on our side of the house. And I don't know why this is such an important contribution. Opening opposition has literally 0 seconds on what your life looks like once you actually don't kill him, right? Like, if it is the case that you feel this moral obligation, if it is the case that you feel tortured, etc., by the fact that he killed your daughter, maybe your life fucking sucks. So, when Aidan points out that your life becomes incredibly worse in a world where you kill him, not just because you might get killed, but also because a bunch of other people now have incentives to want to usurp you, that is when your life gets significantly worse. And also, as we point out, you can weaponize Agamemnon to your advantage, which again, I think the gods would be sufficiently satisfied by if you're now, weaponizing this guy to cause more positive utility in the future. Like maybe gods have a utility machine on our side of the house. So they don't prove why killing him was the best way to solve the moral obligation. We prove you can do this in other ways. We prove you live a better life. That is, I think, the most low burden claim in this debate and the only one proven by CO.